Hey guys, so I'm here with Sophie and your horse. I'll let you say his name.
Dito.
Dito.
His name is Dito.
Dito. And you were having some issues under saddle. Can you tell us a little bit about those, and then kind of why you asked me to come out and give you a lesson with some groundwork today?
Yes, under saddle, he's a very curious guy, but he loses focus, and then he stops and just freezes. And then it's very difficult to get him to move, and sometimes when I ask him to move, he will rear or try and bronc a little bit. And so what happened one time, I was on a hack and ran into that situation, and so he started to bronc a little bit, and that kind of scared me. So then I got off and almost wanted to sell him at that time. So
Yeah.
that's when I knew I needed some help.
Yeah. And you typically ride him and ride through those things, but you're thinking some groundwork will probably help. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm hoping that with some groundwork we can teach him to just keep his focus on me. Like, I don't mind that he looks at things as long as he can keep going forward without, getting all worked up, let's say.
Yeah. And you typically don't do very much groundwork, right? You kind of maybe walk him around or something, but then that's about it.
Yeah, we've done very little groundwork.
Okay.
Only sort of walk, halt. That's
Yeah.
really the extent of it. So,
Okay. What level of training would you say he's at under saddle?
I would say he's trained in dressage, so first level.
First level? Okay.
So walk, trot, canter, shoulder in, the beginnings of half pass. The canter is still a work in progress. So the other thing that I should mention is that under saddle, he's a bit of an overachiever. He kind of anticipates what you're asking for. And when it's something new, he can get a little bit worried and then a little bit hot. But as soon as then he masters the skill,
Yeah.
then the next time he will be, okay, I understand what you want.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you said it that way too, because one of my goals when I'm doing groundwork with a horse is not to show the horse who's boss and to, show them that I'm in charge and I can make them do what I want. My goal is to teach them to solve puzzles. And so there's a specific way you could just make a horse do a bunch of groundwork, but the way I set it up, I give them a choice. And it's when they start choosing to do the thing I'm asking them to do, that's when I know there's a partnership developing where they're starting to work with me, they're starting to think I have good ideas, and that ultimately leads to a horse becoming a good learner, which makes them so much easier to train for everything else. And that's why, even though she's already riding, schooling in level 1 dressage, there's still a lot of room for us to improve that. So, all right, well, we'll get them out. So at this point, I'm not totally sure what is going to move the needle. And one of the principles of horsemanship that I follow is work with the horse where they're at, which means I want to understand from him by testing him with a few things. Is the biggest reason that you're having some of these challenges that he's distracted and he's not paying attention to you? And if he was, then those other things would go away. Is it that he's not totally seeing you as the leader and he's kind of saying, no, I don't want to? Or does he become afraid very easily and decide he can't think through what you're asking him because he's afraid of whatever else is bothering him? So any of those things could lead to some of those issues. So I'm just going to test him out here. And I just carry a few simple tools with me. I have a stick and a flag, I have a stick and a string, and I have a lariat rope. That might not be a bad idea. And so right off the bat, you can tell he's just eating grass and he's doing his own thing. Like, I had a pretty good feel on the lead rope there, and he just pulled it through my hand to go eat grass. So already, to me, he's not paying a lot of attention to me. And so it's like, if this is where we're starting with, if he's not paying attention to me, he's going for grass, right off the bat, whatever it is we're asking him to do is probably not as fun as eating grass, okay? And so what I'm gonna start with is just putting a little pressure here. You see I'm not pulling on the rope. And we noticed there he was not afraid of the flag at all, which is also good. And you had kind of indicated that to me. You said he's probably not afraid. So now he's giving me some attention. It was short-lived, and then he went back to eating grass. But I'm gonna play a little game of See, even there when I moved, he kind of lifted his head up. I'm going to make it a game of, it's hard to not pay attention to me. I'm not going to, I could pull on the rope and make him pay attention to me, but instead of doing that, watch, there's slack in the rope here, and I'm going to add pressure here with the flag, and then I'm just going to hold on the rope until he connects with me, but I need him to disengage his hindquarters and face me. And while I'm explaining this, it's going to go slow, and normally I would move a little bit quicker. I wouldn't really expect him to pay a lot of attention to me with me just completely standing still. That would be harder than getting a horse to pay attention while they're in motion. So normally you would want to flow and go between different exercises, but like here, you see if I walk over here, now his attention was with me. So just that one simple thing moved the needle a little bit. And because I get the sense that he's not afraid, he's just taking over and doing what he wants to do. That's part of why I'm going right to touching him with the flag and not just asking like really slowly like this. I went right to touching him with it. So now I'm just going to move around and I'm just going to ask him to be I'm like the herd leader and I want him to follow the herd around wherever the herd goes. If the herd stops, I want him to stop. I'll encourage that every time he checks in with me. As soon as he does that, I'll redirect him and do something else. So it's probably good that we came out here instead of in the arena where it's sand, because it exposes that level. Like if all it takes is to be on grass for a horse to not be paying attention, to me it's pretty reasonable then that we could expect a horse to not be focused while we're riding them and doing a lot of asking them for more difficult things. Especially this grass is kind of brown and crunchy. I don't know that it's all that desirable anyways. You know, if we were in a lush field of alfalfa or clover or something, that might be more obvious. But I also like that he didn't get too bothered when I put that pressure on him. He's staying focused here pretty good. And then once I have his attention on me, now I'll just make sure he's not afraid of my flag. And so so the difference now is in my intention. The flag is moving in a similar way, a little slower, but my intention now is just quiet. And one of the number one skills that I try to teach every horse that I get my hands on, this is one of the things that all riders would love to be true. If you're calm, your horse will be calm. But that's only true if we've trained them to be calm when we're calm, right? So obviously if you're afraid or scared or really nervous and jittery, that's going to influence your horse as well. But just the basic idea that if you're standing still, it guarantees your horse will stand still isn't true unless they've been trained to do that. So every opportunity I get to lower my intention and just ask him to be quiet while I'm quiet, I'll take advantage of that. So just because the flag moves, I don't want him to think he's got to be reactive to it at all times. Okay, so that's good. Now, the other thing is I was talking about a point system in the interview. And so if I can yield his hindquarters and he'll pay attention to me, if I can do it by just walking and looking at him, that's worth like 5 points, maximum. If I had to pull on the rope and work the flag on his hindquarters and then he finally yielded, that's like 1 point. Does that make sense? So there's a quality of yield. Sophie was just asking me about disengaging the hindquarters. What does that mean, essentially? And when a horse is pivoting on their front feet and crossing over on their hind feet, that's what we call a hindquarter disengagement. And so basically it's an easy way to get the horse's attention on us when we're on the ground. It's kind of like they could run off or they could kick out or they could do something else, but that usually lowers their energy. Okay, so for a horse that's pretty confident and maybe even a little bit dominant like he is, the hindquarter yield should be fairly easy to do. He probably will have a little bit more trouble moving his front end. We call that a forequarter yield. So instead of a hindquarter yield, we're now going to switch to forequarter yields. So I'm going to go back to a hindquarter yield to get to his giving me more of his attention. And you see there he wasn't very committed to it. There he was more committed. That's a higher quality of response. So what I'm getting at is every different exercise I do, I could get up to five points for. Doesn't mean I got all 5, but my goal is to get 5 points out of it. But it's only 5 points if they do it with a quality response. You know, it's like riding. If you had to, use a ton of rein and a ton of leg to move him over and do a leg yield, that's not the same as if you barely shifted your seat bone and the horse just moved over. You opened up your leg, outside leg a little bit and the horse just yielded over to it. That would be a higher quality of response, right? And so that's what I'm looking for. But the point that I want to make to you is that the more different ways I ask him to yield to me, the more I'm gaining in the leadership quadrant, the more he's going to see me as the leader. So just walking a horse around will get you some degree of leadership. If they can be just controlled, leading them by their neck and in hand, that's a good place to start. But there's a lot more things we could do. So a hindquarter yield is one of them. Another one that we could do is I could yield the forequarters. So this time, instead of him pivoting on his front end, I asked him to pivot on his hind end. And he did that quite easily. So I'm not feeling any major braces or issues right now, which is great. If he had a major challenge to this, it would show up as I'm doing these yields. But this is part of why I kind of wanted to work with him, because I wanted to be able to test a few more things. And this horse has not done a lot of groundwork, but he's had enough training where he understands pressure. And so he's making sense of what I'm asking him for, even if it's kind of new to him. So far, the biggest thing that I'm taking away to this point is that it was a lack of attention more than anything else. I could have my dog here and I could have her on a leash and I could hold the leash snug and somebody would be like, oh, look at his dog is being well behaved and right with him. But the whole time there's tension on the leash. And if I unclipped the dog from the leash and they took off running and ran into the neighbor's yard, barking at traffic or squirrels or whatever, you would go, oh, he actually didn't have very much connection with his dog. So my point is, one of the things that will probably also help you with your horse is to spend some more time riding on a loose rein and just doing little checks like, can he follow your seat where you bring your life up and he walks forward? Can you change your seat and he comes back with you on a loose rein? Could he turn right and left without having to reach for a rein? Could he do it off of your focus and maybe a leg cue coming on? Those things would require him to have a higher level of connection with you than just if you tell him where to go with the rein. Does that make sense? So there's nothing wrong with riding with the reins and using those for position, but you're not getting all the benefits of the connection aspect that we gain from riding on a loose rein, which is why I'm a big proponent of we need both. We need connection and then we also need position. So some horses need to work on their position more, some horses need to work on their connection more. And that's where you can just kind of flow in and out of it throughout a ride, or even just warm up on a loose rein to build more connection. And so that's what I'm doing with him when I'm leading him here, is I'm trying to do it without pulling on the rope. So I'm kind of working with him almost as if I didn't have this line on. And the way you do that is just by not using this first. So I'm always setting him up to do these yields without the line. And then if I need the line, I have it as a safety net. Okay. Now I'm going to try a harder maneuver. This next one is going to be a side pass. And I'm going to use the fence to make it a little bit easier. So this one is worth like 10 points, okay? So a hindquarter yield, a forequarter yield, they're worth like 5 points. The side pass, because it's a little harder, is worth 10 points. Ooh, I like that. So because it requires both parts of the horse's body and he has to organize his feet a little bit, that's why it's worth 10 points. There we go, we had a little bit of a start of it. Good boy. We'll try the other side. But what I'm seeing from him is more of a lack of, he's not totally sure what I'm asking him to do, more than he's resistant to what I'm asking. And so that's really good news. So far everything he's telling me is we just need a little more connection, and the stuff that you're dealing with under saddle will just get that much better. Very nice. So, I'm not spending a lot of time doing any of these exercises, because as soon as he shows me that it's not too much of a problem for him, I'm not going to get a lot more points from doing it a million times. Just more testing it out. Yeah. So now I'm going to test the head down. So the last couple of yields I was doing was what I would call steady or rhythmic pressure. And this is a steady pressure, and I'm not loving the feel that I have right now. I feel like I got an anchor attached to the halter. What I would like for him is to just follow that feel really softly. So this tells me, just in comparison to the other yields, how easy they were. That one was pretty sticky. So that one I want you to do more of. And especially since he thinks up the rear when he gets bothered, peppering in, it's when he rears and then you try to fix it, that's what I would call being reactive. I never want to spend more than 20% of my time with a horse being reactive. I'd rather be proactive. And so I would rather, when he's being good, go ahead and ask him to lower his head and yield in a downward fashion when things are going well. So I'm just going to ask for a little backup here. That was quite nice. I'm going to do a little head down again. So I'm setting a frame, and as soon as he gives, notice my hand doesn't pull. That's the biggest habit of a human to have when they're teaching a horse to yield to steady pressure, is when they give, you want the horse to release themselves. You don't want the pressure to follow them. It's very similar to your leg cue. If you're riding, you put a leg on, and the horse yields to it, you don't want it to follow them, or they'll lean on it more. Yeah, but it's very tempting when a human has a rope in their hands is to keep pulling or pushing on it. So we have to be really disciplined to, like, as soon as the horse gives, to go ahead and release there. I'm gonna do that one more time. Actually, this time I'm gonna do a backup off the halter. So the first time I backed him up with, this would be rhythmic pressure. I'm backing him off rhythmic pressure. This would be backing off of steady pressure. And for a horse to be well trained, they basically have to understand rhythmic pressure, which is when, like your leg cue, if you're driving him with your legs a little bit, or on the ground, all this different groundwork. When I walk over here and I'm not putting any sort of feel on him, I'm just showing him what I want. That's all rhythmic pressure. Steady pressure is anytime there's a feel. So it could be your seat cue riding, it could be your legs if you're squeezing, it's your reins obviously if you're holding a feel. And then the last one is rhythmic motion. And so that's where if I change my intention, I don't want him to be afraid of the flag. So this is now rhythmic motion. So I'm not asking him to be afraid of it or yield to it. I'm asking him to tolerate it, just like putting his blanket on or putting a saddle on. Now, did you hear that noise? That's a really good noise. He's blowing out, he's relaxing with this. He's kind of going, okay, he's starting to make sense of what I'm asking him for here. And so when I'm working with a horse, I'm always trying to develop those three categories in as many different ways as possible. But this is the one that's a little sticky. That steady pressure down, and then we'll go steady pressure backwards. So that's kind of heavy. I'm going to try another steady pressure yield, and I'm just going to ask him to flex his head laterally here. So I'm going to stand on the side here, and I'm just going to ask him to bend his head. So that one went really well. Until he lost focus. So I'm just waiting for him to give to it. So I pulled it to a point where I felt some resistance, and then when he softened to it, then I released immediately. That's the try that I was talking about earlier about teaching him to be a good learner. It's like he's figuring out every time he puts effort into my idea, he gets relief. I leave him alone, we chill out. Whenever he takes over, does his own thing, he ran into more pressure. Like that's when I was driving his hindquarters and stuff like that. Let's just do a little circle here, and we'll see how that looks. So he kind of crowded in, so I just changed my flag to a vertical position like this. So I like that. It didn't take too much to get him going. Now I'm going to test what does it take to get him to stop. Not bad. So I just put a little feel, and then I kind of look down. It's the same. See how that's how I asked for the hindquarter yield? So it's the same position there. And again, the idea is to eventually not have to use the rope, to just be able to look at his hindquarters, have him turn away and stop. And so this isn't about exercising his body, this is about exercising his mind. So there we had a little sass, a little bit. So that was resistance. That was, to me, that was the first time we had resistance to where he's like, wait a minute, this is a little bit, looks like work. Yeah. But because there is some resistance here, just based on the groundwork that we've done so far, I would say that if you did this before you rode him, you would have a much more successful ride. If I didn't have if I had his attention right off the bat, if he wasn't driving for grass, if he was soft off the halter in those couple different yields I said, and if he would walk trot and canter around me both ways without giving me resistance, I wouldn't have to work through that under saddle likely. Yeah. Does that make sense? And so I think this will be just these basics right here. I would call these basics. These are actually, I have a series on my Patreon page called Groundwork Fundamentals, and these are those. These are just basic things that I would have every horse do. As soon as they pass, we're moving on to the next thing, and if they pass them all, we're ready to ride. So within a couple of minutes, I can run a horse through these tests. Say it's on a Monday and they haven't been rode for a couple days, I'll just quickly run them through the tests. If they pass, we're ready to ride. If I run into some resistance, then it saves me from having to deal with that under saddle usually. Not always, a horse can develop bad habits under saddle too, but the inconsistency that you were having under saddle, I bet would have been exposed if you were doing some of this groundwork. Yep. So let me just work through that a little bit more, and then I'm gonna have you run through these. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Now when I go to send him on a circle, I'm trying to not tell him where to be, I'm trying to show him where not to be. So I'm pointing, and this is the only indicator of where to be that I'm giving him. But you can see I'm not making him go there, right? But now he's still standing here. So now I'm not telling him to be over there, I'm telling him don't be there. He moved, so I release. And I call that a reset. I stopped asking, and now I'll ask him again. And I'm just gonna keep playing that game until he has a little bit more of a continuation to it, rather than me just making him go the whole time. Does that make sense? So as much as I can, I'm trying to give him responsibility. Like right now you can see I'm facing him, but he's going on his own now. I'm not having to keep pedaling here to keep him going. So this would be similar when you're riding at a walk and the horse is in front of your leg and they're continuing to move out. You're not having to keep going, driving him with your legs as you go. See if we can move it into a trot without any sass. Much better. So then I'll stop him right away. So again, this is why it's like great example there. It's not about the work, it's about the quality of response. Make sense?
Yeah.
You ready to give it a go? Yeah. So the first game you're gonna do is the don't eat grass game. And I want you to have slack in the rope, and you're gonna be out away from him. And the game is that you're the sweet spot. So wherever you go, he should follow you. If he doesn't, so leave slack in the rope.
Yep.
Wherever you go, he should stay connected to you. If he doesn't, don't pull on the rope, but drive the hindquarters until he faces you with two eyes.
Okay, so
let him eat. Now walk over here to the side. Look at his tail. Ooh, did you see that? He's like, good. And now you can pet him with the flag. So in between yields, I like to pet them with the flag to make sure they don't get afraid of it as we go.
So basically, because I'm thinking connection, but it's basically his eyes on me.
Yeah, which is what I would consider connection.
Right?
Yes, connection mentally. Yeah. It's no different than if you and I are having a conversation and I'm facing you, I'm looking at you, we're talking, we're nodding, we're acknowledging each other, communicating. Versus if you were talking to me and I was like, that would seem rude, right? Yep. That's kind of how he felt when I first took the rope, is like, I was like, hey, how are we doing? And he just was like, I'm actually gonna eat grass. I'm not interested in you right now.
Yeah, but I'm thinking connection, I better do something with this rope. But
yeah, so we're looking for mental connection, and the rope is a safety net, the flag and yielding the hindquarters is the mechanism to build the mental connection. So walk to the hindquarters again and just see if he's with you. Drive a little bit. Yep, keep driving. You can touch him lightly and then gradually increase it. Go ahead and touch him. Yep, touch him with it. Good. Go ahead and do it again because he's still looking off over there. There. Now keep walking. Just walk away from him. Good. Then you can put the flag down when he's being good. Now walk around the other side. And just see if wherever you go, if he'll be your shadow and he'll follow you without pulling on the halter. Very nice. And stop. Does that make sense? Yep. So that would be the very first test I would give any horse. Like, hey, because if they're not paying attention to me, whatever else I try to do after that is going to be challenging. So my baseline for any horse is like, pending they're not just terrified of the environment or whatever we're doing, I want them to just have some attention on me. And then I go into all the other groundwork exercises. So walk over here, drive the front end. Maybe the nose and neck first. Yeah, good. And then I'm just paying it, when I'm doing that, I'm paying attention to their feet and I'm observing that when they pivot and step over and it's fairly synchronized and the feet are organized and not just a bunch of commotion, that's when I release. So if they get scrambly and they start moving everywhere, I just keep going until they pivot and step over, then release. And that way I'm offering them a consistent feel in their body for getting me to release every time. So can you guys see how we're not giving him the exact answer? We're asking him to participate and think a little bit about what we're doing with him. Okay, go ahead and ask him to trot by pointing with your left hand first and then lift the flag up. Good. And now ask him to stop by looking down at his hindquarters. And just kind of tip your head down. Yep. And then put a little feel on the halter. Super. Well, let's change direction. So don't move. Point. So you can point. Yep. And then lift. Very good. Super. And you even got a little lick and chew there. He's going. You can put your flag away. Super. And put your arm down. Just relax. So you're kind of in what I would call like an active neutral. You're present with him. You're following him. But you're not cueing him with arms and flags moving around. Let's try the trot again. Super. Whoop. Good job. Try to hunker down if you can and stop him. Good job. Good. So go ahead, yep, and just let him settle there. So you can see there's some resistance when we start asking him to move his feet a little faster. And so what I would try to do with him initially is I wouldn't worry about cantering. I would just get this fairly good at walk and trot. Yeah. And make sure, what I would try to do is get you and him both more familiar with the groundwork exercises before we tackle adding speed. But to me, it's pretty clear, but adding speed is where we're going to run into some of the more resistance.
But so I did not ask.
No, you didn't.
He decided he
yes.
was going to speed up.
Yep. And so if that happens, I would stop him. I would get both hands on the rope and kind of hunker down and stop him and just ask him to settle. But what I'm encouraging you to do is not to worry about cantering him on the circle until the walk and trot is more solid. Because when you ask him to trot, we start seeing resistance there. So there is some resistance under the hood there that he's like, well, buck you, and he runs around and kicking out. I wouldn't worry a lot about the little details of it. I would look at more the big picture, that when we go to the right, he takes over and takes off. Okay, so what that tells me is when I'm circling him, I'm gonna do the bad side first and last. And I'm gonna put the easy side in the middle. Yep. So anytime when I have a horse lopsided where one side's easier than the other, I do the bad side first, then I go to the easy side, and then I do the bad side again. Because usually whatever you start and finish with a horse, they remember the most. And that also ends up being a 2-to-1 ratio. We're working the hard side 2 times to 1 time on the easy side. Right. And so pretty soon it'll be neutral and it'll be the same. So, but I would want you to get a little more comfortable with the tools and the stuff before you try tackling speed. But I definitely would try to get to where I'm asking for some speed, like snappier in the hindquarter, forequarter yield, snappier in the backups, maybe trotting at a side pass at a trot. Walk, trot, canter on line in the circle. Yeah. And you will have much better ride if you work through this, because that being just under the surface is exactly what you're sitting on when you ride him. Now it sounds like he's got some good patterns under saddle as well as a couple of negative patterns. But this would, because we are seeing some resistance, it would definitely move the needle if you work on these things, for sure. Yeah, and this is not really about lunging him. This is about you not moving your feet and him seeing you as the leader because he's moving his feet. But yep, focus on driving him away. Yep, get a little bigger with it. There you go, good job. Yeah, very nice. And then relax it, super. Very good, Sophie. Very good. Now when you ask for trot, just point with your right hand first. Yep. Now lift the stick to the side, not at him, just to the side. Maybe a little cluck.
Yeah, but I feel he's a little too close to me.
So you can hold it like a ski pole and you can drive towards his shoulder and rib cage. Yep. Good. And stop him. Super. Very nice. And just let him sit. So I think it's good for him to develop that ability to speed up and then be ready to slow down right away. That makes it less about the work and more about the mental connection to it. Eventually you could leave him out there longer and be more particular about the shape that he's traveling in. But because I feel like he's just learning how to circle in this way. Now I know you could like put him out there and get yourself lined up and then go, but then he's not really having to think about what he's doing. This requires him to, you and him, to think about the yield aspect of this groundwork. What were your takeaways from that lesson?
Very good. Yeah, and then the other thing that I will have to pay attention to when you want him to go on a circle is to not move myself on the circle, but for me to stay put and indicate with my hand as to where I want him to be.
Yep, super. But I'm really glad that you even took the step to ask for this lesson, because a lot of people, you were able to ride him through the behaviors he was giving you, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should. You know, it's like, because it could be dangerous and we don't want him to slip or rear and fall over or anything like that. And you know, to me the groundwork is kind of fun and it's a great way to connect with them, and maybe you only had 10-15 minutes, maybe you don't really feel like saddling and all that, but you could just bring him out and play with him a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
And just get him a little, paying him a little more attention there. Like for me personally, I enjoy the groundwork. I don't think, oh, I got to do groundwork. It's like, oh, just because you don't have to spend a long time doing it. You could literally, we covered quite a few things here. You could pick 2 or 3 of these and do them in 10 minutes and then get on with your ride, and it wouldn't take much time at all. But I definitely think it would move the needle based on some of the resistance that we saw, from a little bit of a lack of connection at first and then him kind of yahooing on the circle a little bit. That tells me there's some of that energy is being pent up under saddle when we're holding him.
Right.
Yep. And so I think it'll be good to expose that a little bit with some groundwork. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you guys on the next one.